Hello, everybody. My name is Ron Robertson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Picmonic. And joined today for our Mastering Medicine webinar is Carlos Velez, who's going to be popping in here in a second. There he is, Carlos.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, thanks for joining, bud.
All right.
So we're going to give everybody an opportunity today to hear about Carlos's experience in medical school and what he's done to be successful so far. He also is unique in his kind of creative mindset and imagination and ability to create content, and he's going to actually show a lot of that on today's webinar. So over the next 45 minutes to an hour, we're going to dive in, share some tips and tricks about Picmonic, other resources, and what Carlos has done to be successful. And want to invite everybody to go ahead and write in questions in the little webinar widget that you'll see on the side. And we're going to do our best to get to as many of those questions as we can as we go through the webinar, as well as potentially after. So let's go ahead and dive in. I just want to give everybody kind of the 2-second overview real quick on Picmonic and where I came from, my background. So I started medical school back in 2009 and went to the University of Arizona. And, I ended up starting Picmonic in 2011, which was right after I took my step 1. And I did this because I used picture mnemonics to help me remember information. I couldn't remember all those little nuanced details, too much information, too little time studying for step. And so converted a lot of the academic information that was in first aid into picture mnemonics. And ultimately, after it was successful for myself and some friends, wanted to get it out there to the world. So definitely understands some of the pains of being a medical student and trying to become a competent healthcare provider. And ultimately, the Mastering Medicine webinar series is intended to kind of collect and collate as many different tips and tricks and stories from students around the country and world as possible. So today, again, Carlos, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Really appreciate it.
Good to be here. Yeah.
Know that you're calling in from Dominican
Republic. Yes.
Excellent. And why don't you take a second and let everybody know kind of where you're at in school and just a little bit about yourself. Give us kind of a brief overview.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm a 4th-year medical student. I study in Universidad Iberoamericana, also called UNIBE, is in Dominican Republic, and I'm a Puerto Rican. I decided to come here to the Dominican Republic, as well as many other American citizens decide to study in the Caribbean because of the cost. The reality is that in the US, the cost of medical school is $500,000, basically in loans only. And while in Caribbean medical schools, it's 150,000, maybe less than that, depending on the school. So yeah, it is pretty, it's a lot of money, but it's way less than $500,000. And yeah.
Love it. So let's go ahead and, definitely as you're going to be an international medical grad, and there's certain aspects of being in the Caribbean or otherwise that might be helpful for you to share. Out of the gates, is there anything that, starting school down in the Caribbean that you noticed was significantly different than in maybe any of your friends in a US-based MD or DO school?
Yeah, definitely. One of the first things, the years are pretty much the same. It's 4 years, 2 clinical science based first 2 years, and then comes the hospitals and the rotations and the pre-internship and the internship in the last year. But the hours you spend in the hospital more. I just came out from a 24-hour shift in pediatrics rotation. It was tough. But you normally don't see a 24-hour shift until you're actually doing your residency in the U.S.
Right.
In medical school, you don't see that, and that's one of the differences. Of course, one of the first things I noticed is if you don't know the language of where you're studying. For example, here in the Dominican Republic, if you don't manage Spanish, you're gonna have a tough time in the hospitals because yes, there's an international track that has English teachers and whatnot. But the reality is when you're faced with a patient, you have to understand what they're saying, and that complements your learning experience while you're hands-on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's great. So let's go ahead and take some time, and walk students through maybe your first year in medical school, or, you know, especially after your first year. Your first year, I felt like my first year in medical school, I had a lot to adjust to. You know,
Yeah,
I
definitely.
almost felt like I
Yeah.
had to learn how to learn, because it was no longer cram and forget. You know, it was not only that I want to be able to remember this stuff long term, um, but also just the sheer amount of information was incredibly overwhelming. So
Yeah,
tell me
definitely.
about kind of your experience first year, and maybe what you did in order to learn this material more effectively, maybe some of the tools that you used, etc. Let's just jump right in and talk about first year.
First year, all right. So first year, especially for those IMGs that are out there are maybe considering going to an IMG school, Caribbean school, outside of the US. First thing, you're far away from your family in a strange land. That's one of the first shocks. You were saying about adapting to a new environment. That's one of the first things we as IMGs feel in the first year. But as well, the learning. I have a bachelor's degree in biology, uh, but the thing is, like you were saying, sometimes one of those classes you could study a week before the PowerPoints or some of the lectures, and you would do all
Right.
right. But in
Yeah.
medical school, if you don't study every day and really commit to memory some of those things, like especially anatomy, for me was the first class I had in medical school. That was tough. It was tough to do that the first time, and
Hmm.
yeah, like not knowing how to study, like you were saying, it was pretty bad.
It's tough. So yeah,
Yeah,
and you know, ultimately, I think every student has different ways that they go about studying. You know, I think for the sake of the attendees here today, there's a lot of people that are watching online or Facebook Live or things of that nature. Let's go ahead and talk about. Let's get specific. What are different study tools, tips, or tricks that you've used to be successful now, several years into medical school? And we can
yeah.
talk about the resources. You know, so tell me about what has been impactful and helpful for you in the studies over the years.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to start by saying, for example, the first year was chalk. I didn't know how to study. It was all maybe trying to learn things somehow, trying to commit them to memory without really knowing. Then I
Hmm.
started to, in the books, I started to make drawings in the corners. And then I remembered that when I was a kid, that's what I did. I invented stories. When I was looking at the book, I looked at and I actually remember them. But throughout the years, you actually, as you grow older, you think the teachers, when they tell you how to learn, basically they say, oh, you got to read this book, you got to read this whole chapter, or you're going to fail. But they don't really talk about visual learning that much. And as I was studying through those first 2 years of medical school, I was like, you know what? That thing I draw in that corner of the book, that I never forgot because I actually
Yep.
draw it. And so that's when the tools that I use right now, that's when I discovered Picmonic. And I was like, you know what, this is interesting. And one of the first things I used, I remember for biochem class, the lysosomal storage diseases. And
Everywhere.
everybody has problems with that. It's just a
Yeah.
name, a random name, and a different combination of pathologies and different names that you actually have to know. And in reality, it's memorization. And there's no way around it. You have
Right.
to know
Yep.
them. And especially for STEP, they ask you exactly the enzyme and what is deficient. So I only started Picmonic using those first sets, lysosomal storage diseases and immunodeficiencies. And I was like, you know what? All right, I'm just going to do this. I don't want my brain to have all these pictures in it. That's going to be difficult to remember them. But as the time went by, I kept remembering those pictures without actually going back to them. And I was like, huh, you know what? This might be something. And when I started to study for STEP, I tried it the old-fashioned way. Yeah, I took the first aid, I took other texts, I studied a week of microbiology, for example, or biochem, and I had no success. Like a week after that, I started to forget the things.
Right.
But each time I went to a question bank, I always got the questions right that had to do with lysosomal storage diseases and immunodeficiencies. So I was like, Yeah, I think there's something going on here.
There's something.
So something, yeah, there's something there. So I renewed my account with Picmonic, and I've been a subscriber ever since. I haven't let it go, and it's my main method of learning. It's my archive. Basically, my brain is in the Picmonic servers.
Which is
Yeah.
funny. I know that we talked a little bit about this, beforehand, but
Mhm.
you're kind of, not to say an exception, but a very unique example of somebody who's kind of taken not only all the content that Picmonic has, which is, we have 1,000+ topics. We try and cover a majority of first aid, but there's still been gaps in areas that, might have topics or things that we didn't cover. And you've gone and created content to essentially everything that you needed to learn or have memorized, you've essentially committed in some form of visual memory. So let's talk about that. Explain to students and everyone else who's listening or watching today kind of what that means. Why have you done this? How does it work in your brain? Break it down for me a little bit.
Yeah, for example, a quick, the name of the webinar, for example, better flashcards. The reality is when you start studying flashcards, yeah, it's a text, and in the back you write something you have to learn. Let's say the treatment for pathology or a drug, the side effects of a drug. You can combine all those flashcards into one Picmonic. So that's what I started to say, you know what, if I remember the Picmonic made ones, the ones they already have in there, why not make my own Picmonics instead of just creating flashcards to remember the things that are not covered by Picmonic, right? So I just started doing that, and once I started, I just kept going and never looked back. I didn't create any more flashcards, and I just put each fact that I needed to know about that pathology or that farm right
Yep.
in the facts. And that's basically what I do. When I think of about a farm, pharmacology, and medication, and it's not covered in Picmonic, I created Picmonic for that. And that's the first thing that comes to mind is that Picmonic. And each time I get a question about that, I just look for the different characters I actually put in there.
That's great. So one of the
Yeah.
things that you said is, well, actually, I want to tie in a couple different parts. So,
Yeah.
I do. Let's not pretend like Picmonic is the only resource as
No,
students
of course.
use
Of
by
course
any
not.
by
Yeah.
any stretch of imagination. I love that you consider it kind of a golden key for yourself, and I know a lot of students do. But let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about how Picmonic ties into other resources, because you mentioned question banks, you mentioned first aid.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about how you used question banks, where you use them, and then how you've used Picmonic in concert with them,
All
or
right.
have you?
So yeah, yes, I have. For example, and later on in the webinar, I'm going to show an example of how you can apply a clinical case to an actual Picmonic that you've just made.
Love it.
So how's
Love it.
that? Yeah, so yeah, but basically what it is when I'm doing a question bank, I read the clinical case and the
Okay.
answers. If the thing I needed to know is not in the Picmonic I made or in the Picmonics that the system already has in there, uh, at least even if it's there, but you need a little more help to get to that answer quickly, faster, I would add a character that would remind me the next time I get a question or a similar question to that, let's say in
Yeah.
STEP or in any other question bank, I will definitely get that question right, because each time you make questions, that's the truth. People say, ask the more questions you do, the better your score. But the thing that has to do with that is that the more you're exposed to how a pathology is presented, you're more likely to get that question right. So when you see all those types of questions, you keep adding to that Picmonic, and that's basically added to your brain, and you'll always know it transforms into a more complete Picmonic. And yeah.
So let's explain. I want to try and give you an opportunity to explain. When you say add it to a Picmonic, what does that even mean?
All right, so there's a edit feature in each Picmonic, in the ones you created and the ones that are in the Picmonic system. It's right there on the top. You click edit, and the system already has a built-in generator, a built-in search engine. It looks for all the characters that are in the Picmonic database, and even the characters you've already added before. So you just type in the character, and you'll see it again. You'll see it later on in the webinar, and you just add that character. Or if you can remember, let's say it's a character that will associate to the thing you want to remember, right? You looked it up in Google, you look it somewhere, a picture that you can then add and upload to the system, and that's what I mean by it.
Yeah, so it's one of those things a lot of people don't understand that about the Picmonic learning system is that you actually have the ability to modify the content yourself, right?
Yeah,
You can add facts, you can edit existing content, which is definitely very powerful. And it sounds like it's something that you've used. So you would do questions, even in question banks, and then you would reference, let's say, that topic in the Picmonic learning system. So I bring up Picmonic based on what I've just gotten a question right or wrong about. And let's say that there's something in the question or the explanation that maybe isn't included in the Picmonic. You could actually add that fact and then a character into the image with it.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, you're going to have to show people how you do this here in a little bit.
Yeah,
but before that, how about first aid in general? I mean, you know, in many of these webinar series that we've talked to other students who, we all know that first aid is kind of the Bible of medical school. In a lot of ways. What and how did you use Picmonic and first aid together?
All right. So what I do is I go with Picmonic has a pathway. It has the pathway of that year, the version of that year's first aid for using at least step 1 and step 2 even. So I just went to the pathway and I would go with my PDF or actual book and follow along the pathway and see what Picmonics are in there. So that way I don't have to look for each one of them, type in the name of the pathology. They have every single Picmonic that's in that page. And that's what I did. I started to look every single Picmonic that was there, and the ones that were not there and I thought were high yield, or basically I knew I would forget if I didn't make one, I would actually make one in the spot. And then I would not go on further until I actually made that Picmonic and I knew that that page was complete. It's kind of OCD, but it actually works.
Just a little bit, but it's brilliant. So you literally, so if I were to take, let's say, the 2018 version of first aid and open it up, pick a page, in Picmonic, the Picmonic system aligns by pages. So the Picmonic system aligns to the first aid page numbers. So I could be on page 31 and then look at page 31 in Picmonic and see what topics are aligned. And if there wasn't a topic, you would actually go and create a Picmonic for it.
Exactly.
Okay, that's awesome and impressive. With what were, just to, to throw it out there real quick, what were kind of some of the core resources for you? Was it then a question bank, first aid, Picmonic? Is there anything else that you've used along the way that's been really helpful?
Yeah, besides first aid, I also used Pathoma and also the videos. Those are very, very good, especially if you're a visual learner like me. He draws every single, while he's explaining it, he draws every single thing that's going on in the pathophysiology way of thinking. So you never forget it. And even then, you can even go an extra mile and add those drawings, take a screenshot of the video, add those drawings to Picmonic, and make a compilation of every single resource that you're studying from in the Picmonic system. And that's basically what I've done. I've used Pathoma. I see if Pathoma has something that the first aid doesn't have, I will add that Pathoma fact to the Picmonic. Because the first thing I do, I use first aid to make the outline of the Picmonic I will be creating, or even the ones I'm studying from the Picmonic system. I'll see which facts are in the first aid. Then I'll look at the Pathoma and that subject in the Pathoma book and on the videos. And if what he mentions there is not in the first aid or Picmonic, I will actually add a character that makes me remember that fact. Because as we all know, Pathoma, especially the first chapters of pathology, are very important, and they do come in step. And also, you can also use Golgin and any other resource like the QBanks. You add every single, at least that's what I've done. I'm not saying you have to do it, right? But that's what I've done. I've just basically summarized every single resource I've used into a Picmonic card. It may seem insane, but it works. So I'm gonna
I
keep doing it.
mean, we like it and love it. I mean, it's you know,
Yeah.
seeing what you've created is phenomenal, and it's definitely um, it's an investment in your learning. And
Hmm.
let's talk about that a little bit more, because the process of creating a Picmonic can be somewhat difficult or daunting. A lot of people think, right? Because it takes some creativity and imagination, and you're
Yeah,
taking text and
definitely.
converting it into a character, and then wrapping these characters together in a story, in a overarching illustration. And I want to give you a chance here in probably like 15 minutes to actually go through and show everybody how you do that. Um, because I think it's fascinating, and it's one of those that I remember early on, before we actually started Picmonic, you know, we would come up with these crazy stories, and I had a buddy who was a tattoo artist, and he would create these illustrations. And once we showed people, they loved them and they would remember them, but it was almost like, you know, looking at it might not have been as powerful as creating it. So why do you think that is?
So when you create something, you're that's basically active learning. That's way better than just reading something or just writing it. You basically, at least my experience, I remember the creations I do. I basically don't have to study them as much because I created it. I remember going to
Yep.
Google looking for this character and adding that fact. And that's one of the ways I do for not remembering questions in the for not forgetting questions I get in QBanks. Because I remember, oh wait, yeah, I added that character in that Picmonic because they asked me this thing. So it's a memory hook. It's memory anchors, and yeah, you can do that.
No, it's true, and I think there's a lot of research around that supports the kind of the constructive portion of actively creating and what that requires. But at the same time, there's just so much information, right, that you have to consume as a medical student or a student in healthcare in general, that a lot of people don't feel like they have the time and the energy or desire to go and create, you know, 1,000 Picmonics that cover 10,000 facts. So ultimately having it available for a very affordable subscription should be beautiful. But let's talk
Yeah,
about
definitely. No, and you also get access to a lot of other people's creations. If people go into the Picmonic system, they can actually look up for a pathology that they may think it's not a Picmonic, but in the results, they would see a lot of other people's creations. You can see the username and the pathology or farm that comes up, and they would be able to actually learn from them. If they don't like it, they can then create their own. So I think it's even better. You don't have to just create your own cards. You can see other people creations, and you can look and use them for yourself.
so I know you've created a lot of your own content. Have you actually used many Picmonics that other students within the community have made for your studies?
I actually have, yeah. There's a lot of them
Great.
I've used. Yeah, I have a friend I met through Picmonic. We actually did a thing where we would share our Picmonics with each other. He was called Adam, and yeah, we're always sharing these characters. And hey, what character do you use for this, and what character you use for that? And we transfer our characters to each other. So most of the Picmonics I've used are Adams, as well as other people's that come up when I look for them.
It's beautiful. Love it. Love
Yeah.
it. Well, so let's do, you know, before we jump into the creation, and I want to get there quick because I know a lot of people online are interested in seeing how you kind of go through the process of creating a audiovisual mnemonic flashcard or a
Of course.
Picmonic. Uh, but, you know, one of the things when we were talking about yesterday, I want to give you an opportunity to chat about how did you get in? So it sounds like you started using pictures and annotations and visuals to start learning, at least to help you remember information better. Let's say it like that.
Mhm. Drawings,
Where
yeah.
where did you use, you know, when you think about the different subject matter of micro to path to farm to
Hmm.
biochem, what did you use in the different areas, and did you find, you know, Picmonic or others to be helpful in some areas versus not others? Because we
Yeah,
talked. Yeah, go ahead. I just want to give you an opportunity to chat about this.
yeah. For example, I've used Picmonic for everything, every single subject in the first aid. I've used Picmonic. But at the beginning of studying for STEP and in my classes, I had microbiology class, and a lot of classmates were talking about sketchy micro, and I was like, huh, that's
Yep.
interesting. And that's basically, I've used their cards, the sketchy cards, for microbiology. But in hindsight, I used it because, yeah, it was readily available. They told me about it. Some classmates actually share accounts. And what they do is, I saw them and I was like, hey, yeah, that's pretty interesting. I was actually looking at the characters, and it looked interesting. I started using it. But in hindsight, like I was saying, I wish that I would have used the Picmonic microcards, because there are a lot of things missing. And even then, there are a lot of things that's sketchy that I think are, it's a low point in their behalf, because there's some characters that are not as memorable than Picmonic. For example, yes, Picmonic characters are pretty weird, but you have to have in mind that, and you can look at them in the back of Ron's poster. It's right there, angina. You look at the angina, the angel touching her chest. But yeah, but for
You're the
example,
first person to like call out a character from the back here.
I can actually name them all, so that's pretty crazy. Yeah. But anyway, point is that some of the characters that Sketchy has, for example, they would say this rope means this. Yeah, you remember there's a rope in the picture, and you will never forget it. But you sometimes forget what that rope stands for. So what I like about Picmonics is the phonetic aspect of the characters. For example, like I was saying, angina, it's an angel. So when you remember the character, you remember an angel in this pathology, right? There's an angel in this corner, and you're like, wait, angel, angina, yeah, that pathology can present angina. Hydrocephalus, beta blockers. You see those characters, and you're like, oh yeah, I saw that character. What was it? And you go back to what the actual character is, and it helps you remember the name of what you're looking for in your brain. So it's like, what I think Picmonic, one of the strongest points is that it's a lot of ringing bells. It's the character, it's the phonetics, and there we go, the power of the characters. And so yeah, it's a combination. While in Sketchy, yes, they do some phonetic aspects, but they might do the first part of the name. While in Picmonic, they use the whole, every single word in there, and I think it's much better, honestly.
It's really interesting, and by no means, I know the guys who run Sketchy. We're all in the same space. We're all just trying to help students be more successful. So by no means trying to talk poorly on them or their product, but it's an interesting one. I know a lot of students get curious about why we use what would be considered kind of silly phonetic representations. But what you're saying is that which is accurate, which is if you can, you're going to remember the picture or these visual representations in your brain, right? So if you can remember that and then work backwards to figure out what was the core fact, that actually kind of cue recall, right? It's like, well, I remember there was an angel. Oh yeah, the angina. Or I remember there was, this bike that had Tetris. It was a tetracycle. Oh, tetracycline, right?
Exactly.
The phonetic is actually a really interesting part of it. And then it sounds like another piece might have been that let's talk about the number, the amount of content, the number of facts, because it's an interesting dynamic. We try and limit the amount of facts that go into a Picmonic to try and keep it high yield, the most important information that's frequently tested, right? That is hard to remember. But that's typically going to be under 10 facts on an average Picmonic, based on some of the science and research that shows that there's a limited number of objects that you can put in working memory and all these different things of that nature. So we try and limit it, but at the same time, we want to give you the ability to add information and edit and personalize, which it sounds like you've done a lot of.
Yeah, that's especially what I've done. I know the high yield stuff in the Picmonics, but there's always maybe one thing that the questions want to ask They know,
Right.
oh, the student probably doesn't remember this, or they know they studied it, but since it's not high yield, they probably will get this wrong, and they put it in there. So what I do is in the question banks, like I said before, I'll get that fact. Maybe it's not high yield, but it helps to remember, and it's actually in the answers of that question. So maybe when you were creating the Picmonic, you weren't thinking of that fact as high yield, but it throughout the years, maybe it became high yield.
Which is,
So one of what?
yeah, no, that I keep going.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes high yield, and and that's the benefit. And I would say better aspect of Picmonic versus Sketchy, for example, that if something is missing, which there are in the Picmonic and Sketchy drawings, you can't add it. You can't add anything to them. You would have to go in Photoshop, which I actually had to do in some cases, and add some of the characters in there to remember, because some things are missing, especially, and people that maybe have used Sketchy Micro and are listening, and maybe are considering Picmonic, you would see and try to remember the micro cards, the bacterial toxins. I would say go back to those videos and try to remember which bacterial toxin it's an endotoxin and which one an exotoxin. And the first aid is a huge table with a lot of names. The reality is, when in test day, you're pretty much not going to remember if it was an endotoxin or an exotoxin, but they're going to ask you. So in Picmonic, they have these balloons where if it's an endotoxin, it's a complete balloon with the liquid, actually the toxin inside. While if it's an endotoxin, it's like spilling out all the liquid and it's a popped balloon. And I actually had to add that to Sketchy with Photoshop, because there's no way. So the thing is, I kept using Sketchy Micro because I didn't want to double up on micro cards. When I think about Salmonella, I don't want to be thinking about two different drawings, because that would cause some confusion. But if you're just starting to use Sketchy and don't have them as committed to memory as I had them back when I started using Picmonic, I would definitely say switch over, because it will save you a lot of time.
Well, it's a difficult place for me to be in. I don't want to, ultimately, the value of what we are trying to do here for students in the world is give students like yourself an opportunity to share your stories and what's been successful for you. So I'm not going to say anything, but it sounds like, from somebody who's used both Picmonic and Sketchy, that you feel pretty passionate about the direction and the tool that you've kind of chosen.
Yeah, it's all about the system. So like I was saying, my brain, it has all those drawings archived, and it's good to be able to go inside your brain, basically, get that pathology that you know, which is a drawing, and be able to add facts in there. And actually goes back to the principle that's been used by those masters in memorization, the mind temple, the mental palace. And that's one of the things that they would remember this corner. They would put certain things in certain places, and they would always remember them. That's the exact principle of the Picmonic characters, and that's why I like being able to edit them and being able to have my brain basically, but write in a computer where I can just manage it around and study it.
So I love it. I mean, I love everything that you've shared so far, and I want to give you an opportunity to, and I'm just like peeking up this widget where some of the questions are coming in and people are asking some questions. But what I think we should do, someone's asking, how detailed you make your flashcards. And there's a couple questions about the flashcards, your version of a Picmonic and what you do. So what I would love to do, if you're ready and willing, would be to swap this over, allow you the opportunity to go ahead and show people, break it down for them. We've got, another 20 plus minutes. Spend a few minutes, show them how you make a Picmonic. I haven't seen you make a Picmonic before.
Yeah.
I've seen some of your creations, which I absolutely love. But show them how you do this. Explain the process. Share some tips and tricks. And as of right now, you should be able to take control, Senor.
Right. Okay. Let me turn quick. All right. So here you're supposed to see my home screen, right? Okay, so when you sign up to Picmonic, you'll be greeted by this home screen. And you, after that, here's your search engine where you can look every single thing, the pathologies, etc. But what we want to do right now is go to the create page that is right here. So what you do is you click on create. All right, so basically soon you'll see a page where it says My Picmonics, and all your creations are going to be in there. You're going to be able to click on create new Picmonic.
When did you start creating Picmonics, Carlos?
So I started way in the beginning of of starting using studying for step one. So I think I've used it for almost a year and a half, or maybe almost 2 years, I would say.
Well, pull that up. You know, we've got a few more questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and pull some
Okay,
of
there
those
you go.
out. Once you're ready and you have it up, let me know. Did you have a chance, just as far as other resources go? We talked about Pathoma, we talked about first aid, we talked about question banks. Did you use any other resources like Firecracker, Osmosis, Anki, anything of that nature?
I actually did not. I did not use them because I already, like I said, I was doing, I was already using Picmonic, and I didn't want to add more things to do.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna look for example. So I already had this just in case. Okay, example one. That I made a blank Picmonic just for this. The thing is, I just wanted you guys to see where the create button was and where the actual process is. But okay, so first up, this is gonna show up. You're gonna click on edit, or when you actually put the name of the Picmonic you want to create and you click create, this is where the character generator is gonna come up. And here you change the name to whatever pathology is. Let's say you're studying in first aid, and I queued up a screenshot here because that's the only way I can show you the first aid right here. I don't know if you're seeing it. Are you seeing it, Ron?
Yep, we got you.
All right, so basically, let's say you're studying dermatology and you're studying seborrheic keratosis, verrucas, and you're like urticaria. Okay, so many things that look the same. All right, urticaria. Let's go. Urticaria, hives, sporadic wheals that form after mass degranulation. Okay, so I want to make a hives Picmonic, the urticaria. All right, and then you go that this is the topic, and you click continue. Okay, so when you are choosing a background, you have to think, where do you want to place this pathology in your brain? There are already a lot of backgrounds in here, but most of them are from Picmonics that are really actually in the system. So I would generally use new backgrounds because I don't want to get confused with actual backgrounds that the system already has, but you can totally use them and they work perfectly. But let's say, okay, urticaria, hives. What does that where it reminds me of a hive of bees, right? Okay, so let's go to Google. Maybe, I don't know, let's go to a forest where you can, a beehive might be there in a tree, right? Okay, so one of the things I would do is I would go beehive, cartoon, background. You go to images, and you see a lot of things come up, and you can choose whichever you want. But I already queued up an example that I already saved on my computer. You click on it, you save it on your computer, and then you go here, you go to upload a background, which is going to appear soon, and then you go here, and that's the picture of the background that I want to use. Okay, so as you can see, there's a forest there, but we want to add a tree, right? A tree with a beehive, maybe. So I already queued up this beehive tree. and then it's added to the Picmonic. So let's just put it right over here. That's starting to look like a memory hook, hives, beehive right there, urticaria. And we're gonna put that it's also called hives, and that's gonna be the main image that it's gonna remind you of. But of course, urticaria, it sounds like a car, caria. That's where the phonetic part comes in. So urticaria, okay, so I already made this. It's what I did was I added a car with a U on it. It's a car with a U and over here. So you can resize the car and put it over here. And the car basically got stranded in the forest. It's a U car right there, a memory hook. So now for the facts. Like, so you can see here, hives. That's already in the title of the Picmonic. Pruritic wheels that form after mast cell degranulation. Okay, pruritic wheels. So as you're studying Picmonic, there are already a lot of characters. So for example, for pruritic, it's a prairie dog. So what you do is, and I'm just gonna queue up the actual Picmonic with all of this already pasted on it. So basically it would look like this. And for example, also known as hives, pruritic wheels that form after mast cell degranulation. Okay, so what is this? There's a Picmonic about type 1 hypersensitivity reactions, which obviously most of the time are anaphylactic. And this creates a mast cell degranulation, shown here by the mast cell, and it's a hypersensitivity, it's sensitive, it's crying, as you can see over here. And this is all part of the hypersensitivity reaction type 1 Picmonic, where IgE, which is immunoglobulin, which these are blue goblins right here, and everywhere in Picmonic, they're gonna be blue goblins. And IgE, the E, it stands for electric right here. So basically they are electric goblins. They cross-link. I didn't write all of that here in this Picmonic because it's already in the hypersensitivity reaction type 1. But I wanted to do a second memory hook right here in the urticaria Picmonic. Then histamine is the history man, is over here being released, causing the actual pruritic wheel. So here you can see the prairie dog. That's gonna be pretty helpful, and he's gonna be a good guy. He's gonna help the car that has flat tires, that lost a tire in the forest, right? And he has a spare tire over here, and he's all happy about it. So the pruritic wheel. Pruritic wheels, a prairie dog with a wheel, and that forms after the mast cell degranulation. And of course, all these characters were in the character generation, the generator. And it is characterized by superficial dermal edema and lymphatic channel dilation. Okay, so you select this, and you see dermal, the deer mouse over here. You can see the horns and on top of the deer, and it's also a mouse. You can see the tail, and over here, this is already a Picmonic character that I've used to create my creation, my created Picmonic. As you can see here, dermal, it's right there. Superficial dermal edema. Picmonic uses edamames as a character for edema. So I added these edamames that are already in the system. They're floating around in the lake. So you remember this lake, this boat was for standing for mast cells. There's edema for edamames right over here, and the deer mouse. And there's a character over here trying to figure out what's going on, and he has a dyed chest over here that stands for dilation, and the other things are the lymphs, the lymphatic system. That helps you remember the lymphatic channel dilation. Okay, so how do you use this basically Picmonic with 3 facts? How does that help you answer questions, right? So here I have a clinical case, and we're gonna see, if you remember what we just did, you're gonna see a lot of bells ring when you actually read this clinical case. A 25-year-old man presents with an itchy rash. Itchy. What's another word for itchy? Phonetic, the prairie dog, on his chest wall. He denies an exposure to insects and denies any previous allergies. He recently had an upper respiratory infection. Physical exam shows blanking, raised edematous annular lesions. Here's another word, another bell was rang, edema, that are well circumcised. Some lesions are closed. This is his first episode of this itchy rash. He denies any other symptoms. Basically, itchy rash, chest wall, edema, which is not always seen, and he doesn't say anything else. Okay, so what does that remind you of? Urticaria. And here's another example, which is much better in my opinion. For example, let's go to the previous question over here. Sorry about that. You guys just cheated, but it doesn't really matter. A 17-year-old female accidentally eats a granola bar manufactured on equipment that processes peanuts. She develops type 1 hypersensitivity mediated histamine release, resulting in pruritic wheals on the skin. The clinical case is basically telling you what they're talking about, right? But maybe if you don't have that Picmonic we just created, maybe the bells are not rang that fast. Maybe you're thinking about it's different allergic reaction. But you know that urticaria is the result of mast cell degranulation that comes from anaphylaxis. And this is a way you type the type 1 hypersensitivity mediated reaction Picmonic to the one that you just created. And then it says, which of the following layers in this patient's skin would demonstrate histologic changes on biopsy or for lesions? Okay, so here are the different options. I already had selected it. It's dermis. You're saying, oh wait, how was I supposed to know which histologic change it's in biopsy? There's no way I'm gonna know which one of those are. It's probably, I don't know, and then you're gonna do something else that it's not the correct answer. But since you created this Picmonic, you're gonna remember that you actually added a deer mouse for dermis right over here. So you're gonna remember, oh yeah, dermis, it's so easy, that's a given. But you would think it's a given, but not for everyone. Probably they were thinking a different layer of the skin. And you're going over here to a different question, and this is my last example. A 35-year-old woman comes to see her primary care physician because she is concerned about her skin. She states that she noticed a rash after recently starting a new medication. The rash appears as numerous pale raised itchy bumps, again itchy, on both of her legs, as seen in figure A. What histologic pattern is most consistent with the patient's dermatologic condition? And if you see the figure, it's this, right? And that's the thing. You can actually take this image that you see here, and you can add it. Picmonic has the option to add an image right here of the actual, how it actually looks, the pathology. I actually decided to just add it right there in the picture, but you can also add it over here and it would appear in a square right down here. So yes, you got a question, you got that image, you added it, so you don't remember, so you don't forget it. And okay, these are the options. What is most consistent with dermatologic condition? Itchy skin. She's saying she started a new medication. Probably she had an allergic reaction to it. What manifestation of the skin is indicative of after an allergic reaction, and it's pruritic, and it has all of these wheals, pruritic wheals on your skin. And you're saying, okay, what's its most consistent, right? In this condition, what histologic pattern? You're gonna read all of this: dermal edema, spongiosis, hyperkeratosis, blah, blah, blah. But you're always gonna choose dermal edema, because why? Well, because you did a Picmonic that has edamames swimming around and a deer mouse right there. And that's how you answer questions with the Picmonics you've created. This is a little example, but there are much more bigger examples that you can use when creating your own Picmonics with actually a lot more facts. And you see how we answered a lot of questions using just this picture we just created. It wasn't that time consuming, but it actually helped you a lot and nail at least 3 questions on STEP and the question banks. And that's pretty much it.
Well done, man. Well, I appreciate you giving us a tutorial and showing us how you create content, kind of rationalizing some of that and going full circle with it too. I mean, actually tying some of that back to questions. So I appreciate it. I know we are we're kind of approaching the end of the hour, and I want to be respectful of both your time, as I know you're incredibly busy, and everyone else that's joined us today. So I'm going to steal this back. And, you know, I was looking, I just pulled up some of the questions that are coming in. You know, this one might not be, well, let me just go ahead. If 2 months for STEP, which Picmonic would you recommend to study first due to time constraints? So how do you think about, you know, some of the high yield topics that you see frequently tested that students should definitely jump on no matter what, but even using Picmonic, what are some of those kind of core sets? Because I have a few in mind, but I want to give you an
Core set, like the ones I already mentioned, lysosomal diseases, lysosomal storage diseases, immunodeficiencies. They are hard to remember, and when you get the question, you're going to get confused and probably choose a different one that's not the correct one. I think those are very high yield, even if it's 2 or 3 questions in the actual exam. It really helps, just that little help right there. I would also use for the pharmacologic side effects. The toxicities,
Toxicities, yeah, because the toxicities, I mean, you know, a lot of those, even if it's just like a page and it's like, but you need to know with warfarin, what do you give, right? It's like, well, vitamin K and fresh frozen plasma. I only know that because of the Picmonic. So other sets that just for people to recommend, it's keeping the nuanced details across many topics separate. So you mentioned lysosomal storage diseases, absolutely. The glycogen storage disease,
those
vitamins.
two. Vitamins are crucial, yes.
Great, frequently tested. The vasculitides.
Vasculitides, very well made set that Picmonic has already in there. And I've added a lot of things as well there because they're that common, they're always asked. And there's a couple of things you can add in there to help you out, but they're very well made, yes. And I would, if I had 2 months, really, I would just focus on those high yield sets.
It's unbelievable if you can pick off a couple of those core details and actually keep them separate in your mind, what it can do for you come test day.
And as people saw right there, simple Picmonic was made, and you could answer basically 3 questions super fast, saving you time for the actual questions that might take you a little longer. And that's what it has helped me, and I think a lot of people would benefit from by using Picmonic and the system, by creating themselves their Picmonics, and also using the system Picmonics and adding the facts that they would need to answer all types of questions.
So you've given some great advice. You went through a tutorial. You know, it sounds like you've really leveraged the true power of Picmonic, not just in the fact that we have, you know, 1,000 or 1,200 Picmonics for medical students that cover, you know, everything from biochemistry to pathology to micro to the farm. You've not only used the content that we created, but you've gone and added more content to it and personalized it for yourself. You've created content from scratch to fill in gaps that other students within the community can even gain access to by just going to picmonic.com, signing up for a free trial, checking it out. If they want to subscribe and it proves valuable, then you can.
And there's also content. For example, I'm the first verified creator to actually be able to put their creations on sale. So that's something that some creators might take into consideration. All of those creations, you might actually be able to monetize them in some way. If you perfect them somehow, you could be able to put a price in there. So it helps you in your studies. And you're just not investing time on yourself. You're actually investing time on your income. That actually helps. And I have colonic polyposis syndromes set right now. And soon I'll be launching Star Wars themed types of dyslipidemias. And it's going to be pretty cool. Stay tuned for that. And follow me on Instagram and anywhere you want to see that update whenever it's out. And there's a place where you can go in the Picmonic app and the Picmonic system that says add more content. And it's a drop-down menu. It says add a different add-on. And then right there, you will see colonic polyposis syndromes. And then later on, you'll see the dyslipidemias right there, which is a very hard thing to remember. That's in the first page. It's the last page of the biochem chapter. You're already tired of studying the biochem chapter. By that point, and you're like, you know what, dyslipidemias, that's low yield.
Right.
but it's very high yield and it'll be there soon. I'll let you guys know.
So, Carlos, someone just asked, what's your Instagram handle? They want to follow you.
All right, it's Carlos Velez at 210. That's my Instagram handle. Yeah.
So, Carlos Velez, Velez.
Yes. Like in the description of the title of the webinar. Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Carlos, it has been an honor and a pleasure to have the opportunity to do this with you today. So, sincerely appreciate your time.
I mean, I can't recommend it enough. I know people will not understand it until they try it themselves, and that's why I wanted to do. I was so excited to show people how I actually create these Picmonics and how Picmonic works, because it's not until they actually see it, they'll understand it. So if this webinar piques anybody's interest, at least sign up for the free trial.
Thank you all for taking your time to join us tonight. If you guys are interested in hearing about other topics or other subjects or participating in our Mastering Medicine webinar series, feel free to reach out to feedback@picmonic.com. We love talking to students, educators, anyone from around the country and world who has advice and tips and tricks to share with other students. So again, thank you all for joining. Carlos, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks Picmonic for helping me out, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Yeah.
I love it. Well, you have a wonderful evening, and we will see you again shortly.
All right.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.